Okay. So just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Donna Friedman Meir, and I've been in the kids business a long time, spent my career at Nickelodeon, Warner Brothers, National Geographic, and I'm actually a former client of Insight Kids, and so I'm thrilled to be here talking on their behalf today. Just before we get started, I want to get a sense of who the audience is. So how many of you are sort of on the entertainment business network side of things? Anybody? Developers, marketers, other kinds of business execs. A nice little summary. So why are we here today? At Insight Kids, we really believe that if you want to connect with kids in a meaningful way, there are two key things that you need to do. And the first is you have to help them have fun. That's obvious, and that's, I'm sure, what all of you are really good at. The second is that you have to help kids do the work of growing up. Kids every single day are learning and growing, and we're going to talk a lot about what that means today. But it's really important as content creators, developers, distributors to understand who kids are and what's going on in their lives in order to really make the most engaging content for them. So that's what we're going to do. Just to tell you a little bit more about Insight. Insight is a research-driven strategy company that's really focused on building inspiring and innovative content of all kinds for kids and parents. We do a ton of work for companies like Nickelodeon and Hasbro and Crayola, Paramount, DreamWorks, and we sort of summarize our mission at Insight in 3 words, and that is truth plus possibility equals inspiration. And what we mean by truth, and what I'm here to talk to you about today, is that we really focus on getting to that deeper truth of who kids are, why they do what they do, what motivates their decisions, what motivates their behavior. And so my goal today is to share with you a bit of the truth of who kids are, and then hopefully highlight for you a little bit of the possibilities. What does that mean for you as app producers and developers in terms of the kind of content that you can create to connect with them? And finally, if I've done my job well, hopefully you'll leave here a little bit inspired with a sort of sense of confidence and vision about, oh, okay, I get it. This is how I can translate this into what I do every day. So we're going to start by just remembering what it's like to be 4, 7, and 11. Why we need this refresher. Because the world that kids are living in today is completely different from the world that we grew up in. It's driven by media and technology in a way that was not available to us, and kids, as you know, are so completely immersed in it. And the work of growing up that I talked about earlier has 3 components. It's learning, playing, and communicating. And all of these things overlap. Kids play to learn, kids communicate as play. So these are not 3 individual boxes, but they are dimensions of the work that kids do every day. And what we're going to see, and what, again, you kind of all know this, but I think it's important to just be sort of reminded of some of these things before I kind of get into the details of who kids are from a developmental perspective. So kids are still doing everything on the right. Kids still do read out of books, and they still do have marble notebooks that they write in, and they still do their times tables, and they actually learn how to, write numbers with crayons and pencils. But they have all of these additional tools available to them on the right. So, Google and iPads and computers and Excel. So, again, the stuff on the left hasn't gone away. The tools have just expanded. The same is true in terms of playtime. So again, the play patterns that we see on the left, in terms of, gameplay, sports play, music, role modeling, nurturing, all of those play patterns still exist. Kids still do them in the physical world. But again, all of the options available to them have grown so exponentially. You can play sports on the Wii. You can create music with Guitar Hero. You can nurture characters and build worlds in Farmville or Club Penguin. And the type of communication that's available to kids has also expanded. So thankfully, kids are still snuggling up in bed with their grandparents and their parents and using walkie-talkies and things like that. But obviously, just the digital world has opened up an incredible new way that kids are communicating with their friends, with their family, with their world. It's also really important to remember that kids are sponges. And every engagement with content provides an opportunity for them to learn. And I think it's really important to remember that they are going to learn whether we want them to or not. And so, we've been starting to see and hear when we're talking to kids, and, you're going to hear a little bit about my kids, I think, as we go through. I have an almost 5 and a 7-year-old. So, to them, they don't understand the concept of linear television. When they want to see what they want, when they want it, they think they can pause the television. We're seeing kids trying to swipe television screens or expand, and close. So, what you just have to remember that every single thing that you are doing is a learning moment from a kid's point of view. It is important to say that, we feel really strongly that you have a responsibility, that we all have a responsibility as content creators for kids to provide good role models and, good learning opportunities. And I think it's important to note here, and again, you all know this, but, moms and parents and gatekeepers are so critical for kids, throughout their lives, but most, specifically in that sort of, up to 7, 8, 9. And we sort of talk about that there's a model in just thinking about sort of your relationship with a parent. And there are sort of 3 ways that parents react to media content for their kids. They either promote it, permit it, or prohibit it. So obviously, you don't want to be in that prohibit column. You don't want to be that I'm not going to let you watch or do or play or buy X. It's okay to be in the permit column, but where you really want to be is in that promote box, where and especially in the app world, where the parent in many cases is doing the purchasing. You want to be that place where the parents are going to first, and they know they're going to get a positive experience for their kid. And again, this, but again, it's just important to sort of state it up front that kids today expect 360-degree brand experiences with the content and characters that they love. So again, as app developers, it's just really important to remember that what you are creating is just part of a larger ecosystem in a kid's life. And from a kid's point of view, there is no boundary between what is digital and what is physical. They just don't think about it. To them, it's not a world with lots of little circles. It's just a world filled with the stuff that they love. So I think it's just important to remember that as we move forward. So as I said, I'm going to focus now my conversation on really talking about those key developmental stages. We're going to look at kids from a social, emotional, cognitive, and physical developmental point of view. Just again, as for many of you, it might be a refresher. For many, as Lana said, maybe this is new information. I do want to put a very, very important caveat out there, which is I am talking about the average. Every single kid is different. All kids develop at their own stage and at their own pace. So what I am talking about is sort of the overall average. I don't want to, sort of kids can't be so easily put into a box. So who kids are from a social emotional perspective. First of all, it's important to remember family is central. I mean, that is the core of their being at this time. And I was actually thinking about it in the prior session when there was a little bit of a discussion about social apps and the idea that kids and parents, kids want to play with parents, parents want to play with kids. That makes complete sense from a developmental point of view. Again, I have a 4.5-year-old. Thankfully, I am still 100% the center of his universe. He just told me last week he wants to marry me. That made me very, very happy. So, from a social point of view, yes, they may be beginning to, start playing with one friend, but family is the center of their world. They still very much enjoy pretending, playing dress up, imaginary games. They are beginning to develop a sense of self and a sense of independence. But again, they're always looking for that attention from grown-ups. As we said, they can be easily frustrated. They're not good with transitions. They're working hard at sharing and turn-taking. They are beginning to get out of that completely self-centered, egotistical, it's all about me world, and beginning to have a sense of other. And with that, there comes a little bit of a sense of danger. So that's something important to keep in mind. From a cognitive perspective, and I think, this is really critical from a developmental point of view, and obviously PBS and, I know Angela Santamero and those guys very well, and they really have been revolutionary in terms of bringing that child development, educational, that real focus on like who kids are. And I think why they've done as well as they've done is because they really do put the kid at the center of their development. And they understand completely cognitively where kids are at. I think very often, we as grown-ups, and I know I myself as a former producer have tried to do this at times, where you just want to you have a great idea and you want to throw it in, but you lose sight of really what kids can take in at this age. So again, it's important to remember, yes, kids can, they can begin to categorize, they can speak in sentences, they can sort objects by shape and color and size. They can work in an activity for maybe up to 10 or 15 minutes. They are more process-oriented. They're not so focused on the finished product. They may start saying, I'm going to make a rainbow and butterflies, and the next thing you know, it's, a pond with fish. They're mastering cause and effect. And again, a lot of these are all elements that play very much a part of app development and how apps work. They enjoy simple rhymes and nonsense words. They're beginning to distinguish the difference between fantasy and reality. Again, as Jennifer talked about, it's all about why at this stage. So that's kind of where they are. They're very into routine and a sense of order. The more you can sort of help them navigate this world that they are incredibly curious about in an ordered and simple way, I think the more successful that you'll be. From a physical point of view, and obviously this is also critical from an app development perspective, kids, they're still, they're mastering their gross motor skills. Their fine motor skills are really not that refined. I was talking to an app developer friend of mine who talked about, in early work that she did, she had a plan where the kid had to drag something, in a straight line from here to there. But for a 4-year-old, getting from here to there does not go like this. It goes like that. And so you just have to remember that every single beat on that screen is a touch point for kids, and you've got to be prepared for what's going to happen because they're going to go there, whether you want them to or not. They will touch everything. Also, what's going on for them physically, obviously, they are learning to control their urges if you are successful potty training your child. They're learning to multitask, so riding a bike requires them to be able to steer and pedal at the same time. They can dress themselves. So again, just some key things to remember. What they're doing, parallel play, so that means it's more side by side. There's not that much direct interaction between two kids. Dress up, arts and crafts, social play. And one of the things that we have seen is apps that mirror play patterns that kids already know are that much easier for kids to sort of pick up and adapt to. So that's something to think about as you are developing your apps. Are you building on existing play patterns, or are you creating completely new ones? Again, caveat. These, I'll just talk a little bit about gender difference at this age. Again, it's important to remember, I know these look like stereotypes, but the truth is there is real truth to this. From on the boys' side, Boys tend to play more side to side, focused on a third object, where girls are more playing face to face, focusing on each other. In pretend play, boys are more rough and tumble. They're working on things, moving from danger to safety, playing dragons, dinosaurs, that kind of thing, where girls' pretend play more revolves around social dynamics, mommy and child, friend to friend. Boys are more often choosing games and toys that are more physical and action-oriented, and girls are choosing toys and games where they can explore relationships. And so how does it feel? I think I love these quotes because they just get at some of the sort of truth of where kids are at. I love when mommy and daddy tuck me in at night. Why are there no more leaves on trees? Look at the pattern I made. I learned to skip really fast. Watch me. I don't want to take a bath. I want to keep playing. So what does this mean from a content perspective? One of our sort of summary about what you should think about when you're developing content for this age group is that engaging content needs to be nurturing. And what we mean by that is that combination of, familiar yet with a little bit of challenge. I think it's really important, as I sort of said before, that everything is new to them. And so they can't learn too many things at once. So if you want to teach them colors, give them a world and a background that is familiar. So, that's what we mean here by, familiar settings, characters, and activities. When I talked about the importance of routine, that's a relatable and predictable format. If I do this, then this will happen, then this will happen, and then this will happen. That's incredibly empowering for kids at this age. Again, they're super why. Clear takeaway messages. It's critical. Try not to do too much at once. And I've just put some of the kinds of, key media franchises that I hope most of you know that I think do these things really well. And finally, engaging but simple look and feel. And if you take anything away from this part of the conversation, it's simple, simple, simple. Again, as creators, we want to make it as stunningly beautiful as we possibly can and all the bells and whistles. But remember that there's a fine line between giving kids quality and distracting them from the core of what it is that you want them to do or you want them to experience. So simplicity, repetition, 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 repetition really works. It's very, very empowering for kids, and I think for us too. So I will repeat myself for sure today. Okay, so now we're going to grow up a little bit, and we're going to talk about, and actually, should I stop on 4, or maybe I should go through the whole thing, and we'll save questions till the end. We're going to grow up a little bit and talk about 7-year-olds. And we call 7-year-olds try againers because this age is all about mastery. So social emotionally, they are becoming more social creatures. Parents are still, thankfully, very important in their lives, but they are definitely becoming more social creatures. They may have a best friend at this age. And while they still enjoy solitary play, they will migrate towards a larger group. But what comes with entering the social world in a bigger way, comes some of those insecurities and sensitivities of being liked. And again, my daughter right now is suddenly into, fashion, clothes. They're beginning to understand games with more complex rules, and they're forming a stronger gender identity at this age. Cognitively, this is an incredible time. This is when kids are learning to read. They can handle transitions in a much more easy way. They're starting to understand more complex language, similes, metaphors, hyperbole. They can write incomplete sentences. They're just beginning to develop inferences based on concrete observation. They're not yet abstract thinkers, but they can make inferences based on direct experience. They're still mostly process-oriented, so they're not confined by success. But again, it's really about like the doing and the mastering of whatever it is that they're, this is the age where sometimes kids start playing an instrument or more seriously playing a sport, and they want to get good at it. From a physical point of view, they're losing their teeth. My daughter's at 10. She's way ahead of her friends in that regard. They have uneven and incomplete muscle development. So you'll see wide variations at this age in terms of kids' proficiencies, in terms of their fine and their gross motor skills. They are able to start kind of doing two things at once. They can, bounce a ball and run at the same time. They're fine-tuning their hand-eye coordination. And there's a sense of real satisfaction and achievement from their physical life. What are they doing? Games. It's also collecting is a really important activity at this age because, again, they have a sense of, what makes things alike and what makes them different. So I don't know if any of you lived through the silly band craze that has gone through my house in the last couple of years. Again, I talked about more focused activities. This is where they're starting to take those ballet lessons and violin lessons and explore things like that. And communication is becoming more and more important. And again, I'm sorry to keep talking about my daughter, but she's fun. I can have a real conversation with her on the telephone now in a way that I couldn't even 6 months ago, which is pretty fun. In terms of gender differences, you see a lot of, it is interesting as much as, and I know, in my early days at Nickelodeon, we were very big on this whole notion of gender neutral. And the truth is, that's really, really, it's hard to do, and it doesn't wholly exist. Boys and girls really are different in their essence. Boys at this age more often play in large groups, where girls will start pairing off and again have a best friend. Boys choose games that are more competitive, more complex, with explicit rules and goals. Girls' games are much more collaborative and open-ended. Boys participate, again, in more fantasy play that revolves around high stakes and action. And girls' fantasy play is more relationship-based and sort of dramatic. So this is how this age feels. Last week I wanted to be an astronaut. So next week I'm going to be a trapeze artist. They're really trying on different identities and sort of figuring out who they are and what they're good at. On Sundays I still like to build forts with my dad. If my friends and I fight, we just talk it over. They're beginning to be able to navigate social relationships in a more sophisticated way. From a content point of view, we find at this age that the most engaging content for kids offers them safe risk-taking. So they want, again, they're sort of in this in-between. They're in the heart of being a kid. So they want humor for their age, that, the kind of physical and character-driven humor that you find in a SpongeBob or in Toy Story. But they also want high-stakes situations, but that don't go too far. So actually some of the later Harry Potters really are they're too risky, they're too dangerous, they're too scary for kids at this age. So I think like Star Wars has done a really good job of leveling its content for different audiences on different platforms and giving them the kind of experience the kids can handle at each of their appropriate ages. They want content that break the rules, but not too much. So a show like Phineas and Ferb, if you don't know the show, it's about two kids who it's basically endless summer, and every day there's a mission that they want to achieve, and it's outrageous and it's crazy, but it never goes over that edge of being dangerous. And they also want more and more interactive control, and that's why apps are so powerful for them at this age. They want the ability to control their environment. Okay, so now we're going to grow up a little bit more. So social emotionally, as I said, kids are fully social at this age. They enjoy being with peer groups, usually of the same sex. They're very much becoming more self-conscious. Again, they need to make sure, their clothes and what they're doing and kinds of bands or sports figures that they're into are cool. They're connecting very aggressively with social media and technology. They're starting to worry about their body image. They're starting to have more of an identity within their social circle. Very much, this too is a time where they are figuring out who they are. So at this age, they'll say, I am a gymnast, but I'm not good at math. I'm a pianist, but I don't like drama. Whereas earlier kids are much more flexible and fluid in terms of figuring out who they are. At this age, they're starting to define themselves. Cognitively, and again, this is really important from an ABS perspective, kids at this age, can handle delayed gratification. They have more abstract thinking. They can look towards the future. They can understand more complex rules. They can categorize in more complex ways. They also may begin to challenge rules and want to kind of break the rules. So those are all, I think, important dynamics as you develop content for them. Physically, yes, hormones are starting to kick in at this stage. They have improved coordination and reaction time, and obviously, you guys know better than I how facile they are in terms of their ability to, play both in the physical world and the digital world. They have increased hand and body dexterity and strength, and competition and winning is more and more important to them. So what they're doing, they are connecting. I just did a talk recently in France on teens. And these kids, they're not quite there yet, but they are, they want to be in touch and connected all the time. Exploration, solitary time, which still can mean reading a book, or it can be playing video games for hours, or it could be, going for a walk in the park or playing, basketball drills in the driveway. And competition is really important. And the gender differences, again, still very much exist at this age. Boys, like many men, seek out socialization mainly through common interests. So they like the same kind of video game, they like the same sports teams, they have the same, they're into math or science or whatever it might be. Whereas girls, are much more driven by sort of social peer, what's cool. From boys, from a texting and mobile point of view, they're using, we've seen that boys will text back and forth like, hey, want to get together? Sure. 10 o'clock, my house? Great. Done. Girls will use it to just chat. Hi. How are you? Good. Great. Boys are more drawn to content that depicts action and really, again, pushes those boundaries. Girls are more drawn to content about social relationships. Boys are more concerned with kind of height and weight. Girls are more concerned with weight and looks. How does this feel? As I kind of said earlier, it's that I'm good at the piano, but I'm not a great athlete. I love my parents and everything, but I don't want to hang out with them all the time. I want my iPad, and I totally know how to get my parents to get me one. So they're figuring out how to manipulate us. I only got to be on my report card because I forgot to write a concluding paragraph. The range of what we've seen in terms of kids, social, emotional, cognitive, and physical development at this stage is huge if you think about it. So we find, and again, 11-year-olds are called tweens for a reason. They really are at that place between being a kid and being a teenager. And so we find that the most engaging content for this age group supports that transition from being a kid and being a tween. So again, you've got the same two SpongeBob and Toy Story on the left. They do want content. They may not brag about it to their friends. They may not wear SpongeBob t-shirts to school, but they still enjoy that kind of silly, playful humor that just reminds them that, life is still can be simple and just fun. And at the same time, they very much are looking to media to model older social behavior. So they may not be engaging in the kind of social behavior that is modeled in shows like iCarly or Degrassi, but they know it's coming. It's quite amazing how much kids use media to kind of test out and explore how different social relationships work. Again, they're looking for content that's edgier and more rule-breaking, whether that's Call of Duty or YouTube. YouTube provides, there's just a vast world of uncensored, unexplored content for kids that can be very, very empowering for them. And finally, they're looking for aspirational content, whether it's, Taylor Swift or Top Chef. These kids really are beginning to look ahead and think about like who they are and who they want to be. I think Disney has been so successful with a lot of its shows because it really understands that. It's got, a lot of those shows have a great balance of feeling somewhat relatable to kids, but also being very aspirational in terms of the content. So what does this all mean for you? I will end where I started, which is I think it's really important to meet kids where they are. And remember that your job is to connect and to inspire them. And to do that, you need to first help them do the work of growing up, and hopefully I've helped start you thinking about that today. And then at the same time, help kids have fun, which I'm sure you're all doing already very well. So my most important sort of piece of advice is know your target audience. It really is hard to make an app and they exist that sort of appeals to a wide range, but I think it's really critical to sort of start with a clear target of who that sweet spot is, and then more can surround that. But I think if you sort of start out by like, I'm going to make a game for 2 to 11-year-olds, that's pretty tough because as I think we've seen, you've got a vast array of where kids are at this stage, socially. So these are the questions you should be asking yourself. Where are they social emotionally? We talked about, they are moving from solitary to social, from family to friends, from silly to more serious. And through all of it, they're really figuring out and exploring who they are and figuring out how to express who they are. Cognitively, what is their cognitive level of development? Are they going to be able to cognitively grok, what it is that you are trying for them to learn? In this case, obviously it's huge. They're going from learning to hold a pencil to, typing 300 words a minute. From, just beginning to kind of get control over their bodies to being out of control again as the hormones kick in. Cognitively, I kind of said all of that already. So it's a huge array, from this 4 to 11 and 12, and then you know what happens after that. So these are the critical questions you've got to ask yourself. Am I meeting kids where they are from a developmental perspective so that, because as good as you are at making entertainment, if kids don't understand it, you're just gonna fall flat. And with that, thank you.